My name is Harriet Riley, and I am a digital content strategist from Nemo Design, coming out of Portland, Oregon. And this is my second time attending the trade show. So this is a total honor to sit up on stage, especially after an amazing panel. So today, the purpose is really for you guys. The idea is that I do this kind of content strategy every day for my clients. So this is a sweet break for me to kind of come outside of my computer and kind of be with you. So I designed a presentation today, which is really high level. And it starts looking at the changing spaces in the outdoor industry. And I'm going to take you on a kind of a journey with me. My hope is that there's a little something for each one of you to pick up along the way. You know, because I'm a strategist and a philosophy major, I do know that I cannot solve all your problems right now, content or otherwise. And so the purpose of today's kind of 40 minutes is really to take you through a different kind of approach towards content strategy. So I hope that you all find a little piece to bring back to your teams. And with that, I guess the kind of rules in order here is I'm going to be speaking for about half an hour, 40 minutes. And the idea is to open it up at the end so you guys can ask me questions that you can't necessarily go in and ask Google. Google knows a lot about content strategy, so I definitely encourage all of you guys to type away afterwards. And use our 20 minutes to half an hour to ask a question that maybe the whole group will benefit from. Because like I said, until I can get in and solve your real problems, I don't know if I'll be able to give you an absolute answer. So with that being said, today I'm going to talk about content strategy. So just kind of room participation. How many people are familiar with the idea of content strategy? Sick. Nice. That's why I have a job. And how many of you have a content strategy or work with a content strategist? Awesome. Okay, that's good. Well, because a number of you didn't raise your hand, I'm just going to quickly kind of talk about what content strategy is. And because I think it's one of those buzzwords. I think it's a buzzword that has come up in the age of social media and digital, and everyone says, what platforms am I on? Do I partner with influencers? How do I talk to new people without alienating my core? So kind of taking a step back, I really find that a lot of people come at me with these big questions. And I'm like, let's actually just define what content strategy is, because it's this idea, my cute diagram here with the bees, is that content is everything that lives outside of your brand. And it is the little bees that bring people and ideas and attention back to the beehive. So content strategy is in no way independent of brand strategy and brand expression. In fact, it is so necessary to have those things defined for someone like me to come in and do my job. I know there's a lot of test and learn opportunities with content. So a lot of people think, oh, well, maybe I'll just hire a content strategist and secondly, we'll define the brand. So the first thing I want to make really clear is that for me to have a job and to do my job really well, I really depend on there being a brand with a mission and a vision and a promise. And I guess, that's not totally new. We've always needed to create content around our brands and around our products. But kind of coming into the later millennia, it's been really clear that content is doing a lot more for brands than simply bringing your consumers' attention back to the product or back to the brand. Now, people are paying attention to content who have no interest in participating with your brand. Your brand is on the front lines of cultural conversations, which is why brands are being held so responsible for, pushing the conversation around inclusivity, equality, transparency, whatever it is. And damn right we need brands out there, because we produce more content. We produce the images that make you either feel seen or, you're shown that you should be somewhere. And so it is a brand's responsibility to get up there and make sure that they're not just talking about themselves, that they're out there and they are pushing a cultural dialogue. Now, to what extent that is will totally depend on the brand. I don't think every brand should lean into a big political, cultural conversation. In fact, I think that can go really wrong sometimes. But that's why you need to hire someone like me. This is my little cartoon of myself. I would normally be wearing a beanie if it wasn't sweltering humidity outside. But you hire someone like me to make sure that in every piece of content you're putting out in the world, that not only is it validating your brand and proving your product, but it shows that you care and that you're aware of being on the front lines and that you're doing something about it. And it's really easy to go wrong. Really, really easy to go wrong because, again, you have people outside of the industry paying attention to you. So with that being said, my topic today is differentiate and don't alienate. So in there, you can already feel that opinion statement, is that now when I look out into the world of outdoor content, even to the conversations that were just happening up here on stage, there's a lot of alienation. I don't see myself in that image. Are you ignoring me? That seems really outdated. I've never seen anybody do that before. Oh, you must be an old brand. Oh, how privileged are you to be on top of that mountain when I will never be able to get there outside of my school loans? There's a lot that rile people up and they feel very alienated. But we know we can't feel that way. We need to, instead of choosing a really finely defined narrative and only championing one area, we need to take the step back and just say, well, how can I be something really core for a group of people, but then also get out there and invite my new consumer. We're in marketing and branding. There's always going to be new people, and we're not allowed to stop ignoring them or at least stop learning from them. So there's kind of three, you guys can't see that very well. Well, there's three different kind of sections that I want to talk to over the next half an hour. And that's that right now, we have a bigger opportunity to mess up than ever before. You're seeing in the data, there is an amazingly booming industry with absolutely no signs of growth. And so if you make a misstep now, who knows what that's going to lead you in the future. And there's really two things that we need to be really, really aware of as we look at that growth and that opportunity and we ask ourselves, what is our content strategy? How do we create all that wealth of content around our brand? So I'm saying there's two things that are mandatory when we think about content strategy. And the first is representation, and to represent hard. And that means taking the time to invest in all of those different narratives to make sure that your audience, they see themselves. And maybe they don't need to see another face that looks like them, but maybe they need to feel something universal. They need to feel invited. This is where you really invest in that inspirational content, where you're looking to learn from communities and join them. But the second thing, outside of making amazing imagery, which speaks to a lot of people's hearts and souls, is really to be a resource for them. Because we know, as smartphone users, I'm looking out in the audience now with everyone on their phones, that phone, that thing that's in your pocket all the time, that's not just a device to text, that's to help you navigate. When you hit a wall and you sit there and you go, oh, I just messed up, I didn't know what I was doing there. It's between you and Google. And you trust that Google top link more than you're gonna have the audacity to go out and ask your grandpa, why didn't I do this right? We live in a culture where now we know we can go and seek the answers without needing to have immediate people right next to us. So let's be a resource in those moments that people come and try to find us on their phone. So I'm going to start with a couple of data points. I think that data is always a really nice way to ground a conversation. And I think that for me, I'm only 2 years into working in this industry. I come from 7 years working in tech and CPG and just being a starving philosophy student trying to find our way in the corporate world. But there's some really amazing points that come out in the data that I just kind of want to ground us all in. So the first thing is that this is an $887 billion industry, and until I did this research, I had not appreciated that outdoor outpaces pharmaceuticals. I would have thought pharmaceuticals boomed above outdoor, but it's because you're looking at trips and gear and travel, right? But it's also because you have 144.4 million participants. That's almost half of the US population. So that's amazing. So no wonder the Adidas and the Nikes of the world are trying to figure out how to come into this space and how to get a little bit of theirs. Who doesn't look at those numbers and say, cool, I want in? In the last year, there were 10.6 million new participants. That's the biggest growth we've seen in the new millennia. Again, if I'm looking at a data sheet, of course, that's a huge number of people that are participating. They've got money. They don't necessarily know what they're doing. Who knows? Maybe those are our Polar, consumers. Maybe those are my Rumpel consumers. That's a brand new group of people to talk to. And what's really cool is when you look at that growth, most of it is coming from 18 to 24-year-olds. That tends to be the case when you look at most industries. They're coming out of college, they've got disposable income, they're exploring all their passions and their interests. But what's even cooler when you look at 18 to 24-year-olds is that the biggest growth for the first time in history is coming from minority women. And those women are coming from parts of the country, specifically Southern California is what a lot of the data will point you to, that aren't in those big outdoorsy areas that the industry was really built on. And that's really exciting. And that's where most of my clients come at me. And they go, how the hell do I talk to 18 to 24-year-olds? And they're girls. Oh my gosh, they're girls. How do we teach girls how to camp? So that's this is part of the presentation, is always having them take a step back and to really think about how cool that is and maybe not how scary that is. When you ask and you survey all these people that participate in the outdoor, you find that 80% of them want to do more of it. So not only do you have an amazingly thriving economy within a huge group of new people, but everyone that's currently doing it wants to do more. And I don't really know what other industry you look at. I worked in soda pop. Everyone said, love soda pop, wish I couldn't drink so much of it. I love my cell phone. I wish I didn't feel compelled to buy another one every 2 years. This is an amazing moment that everyone sits and they're like, man, I want to get outside more. But this is the data point, this next and final one, that really kind of made me think, maybe I'm bringing my own assumptions to the table as being a new participant in the space myself. And when you talk to them and you ask them, okay, you want to get outside more, how far do you want to travel? And they want to travel 10 to 16 miles. Now that's the length that I take to get to work every day. I live in Portland, Oregon. I'm going from St. John's out into the middle of Southeast. And you're telling me 10 to 16 miles is your idea of getting outside? Well, I'm immediately confronted with the fact that maybe that's not my idea of outdoor. So I wanted to dig into that a little bit because I thought, as a new content strategist in the outdoor space, I should probably understand that a little bit more. Because coming from the outside, when I see mountaintops and I see these arid landscapes without a single tire track or signs of an electrical pole, that doesn't speak 10 to 16 miles for me. That is getting out there. That's 100 miles, 200 miles. That's traveling down to a different country, right? So I started digging into it a little bit to understand, well, what does that mean? And I came across this stat that said even with all of this amazing growth, there's actually 700 million less outings. And so that's just where I became very confused, because in my past life, before coming into outdoor, it would be very easy for me to read data points like this and say, okay, this is what we should be doing with our content. Here's the narrative. Here's where the growth is. Let's follow it. Let's reflect it. Let's champion it. But when I see this, I think, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So again, I'm taking you on a bit of a journey with me. I'm sure there's some really educated people in the audience that are already like, no, I can debunk some of that data for you. But for me personally, when I went out and I'm doing my desktop research, I found that this was kind of the biggest conversation to help me understand that plummeting of outings. And they said, backpacking is out and car camping is in. And you're just seeing a complete redefinition of what it means to get outside. But still I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, if more young people are buying more cars and getting outside more, wouldn't that just increase the amount of outings? So then the second kind of theme that comes up is a shift in mindset with these young people. and that they're not necessarily going out there to conquer a dream or to do something no one's ever done before. I mean, they are. I mean, there's a huge group of people that are doing that. But you typically see people say, oh, they're out there for their friends. They're just hiking to the top of a peak for the Instagram. They're doing it for their social life or their exercise. And I was like, okay, I buy into it. I'm one of them. I get invited on hangover hikes, and I go, okay, let's do it. So I can relate to that. But I suddenly said, what does that mean? If my client is coming and asking me, what narrative do I invest in? Who do I cast to tell that narrative? And where do I place it really to reach and resonate people? I look at this and I go, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. So I wanted to look at 3 brands that are a part of that new growth. I wanted to see how other content strategists were looking at these same data points, and maybe I could analyze their creative and I could figure out where this disconnect was coming from. So the first brand I looked at was REI's Evergreen line, and immediately I see these data points reflected. They're on top of a building, they're in New York City, they're all kind of social, but if actually you look at them, they are all having their own experience. None of them are actually looking or engaging at one another. They're finding a moment of solitude. I buy that. I've had my friends come back from living in New York City, return to Portland saying, not for me. But I still wonder, is that really changing and shifting the outdoor industry? I have a hard time buying off on it, because even when I participate, you feel cheeky, you still aren't there, you're not living your true outdoor. So it has to be something else. So then I looked at Urban Outfitters, and they created a whole line of Life Without Walls. And again, I see these same data points. It's a social group of people. They've got a lot of diverse representation here. You actually have people that are interacting with one another. Looks like they've been on a day hike and they're really colorful and they're cute. But it's still kind of lacking that emotion and that ambition that I was so used to seeing from some of these other brands. And so then I thought, Nike. I've worked with you guys. I know you guys are crazy and you invest so much in research. What the hell are you guys doing? Well, they're putting their performance wear out into nature and putting it to the test, where it's all about taking risks. And it is about personal exercise. And again, I just found myself feeling, doesn't this all just feel a little contrived? And if these are the leaders in the space that I should be learning from and I should be helping, guide my mid-level companies, I'm still lost at what I can actually do. So this is the point that I thought maybe I need to take a step back. And maybe I'm trying to be a little bit too linear by looking for the answers in the content or in the data points. So I just have a couple of slides just to kind of talk about the shift. Because what I'm feeling, and when I say it feels a little prescribed or a little contrived, what I'm talking about is this tension between the original outdoor pursuit of mountaintops. It was baby boomers getting out, kind of giving the middle finger to the capitalist system and doing things their own way. And then being contrasted with these young millennials that are out there just doing it for the gram. And I think I'm kind of caught in that tension in between, because neither of that feels right. So if I take a step back and I try to think around the different things that were happening in our culture that led to some of those initial narratives, to the narratives that I see today, then maybe I can actually start unpacking that shift and unpacking why I'm seeing so many less outings when in contrast to how many more people are in the space. So kind of from a top down, we'll kind of bring this down, is that when I think about baby boomers and I think about the heritage brands, they all were these young people that came to life. Maybe some of you are in the audience now, and it was coming out of college and having the Environmental Act being signed. And as a culture, we had a unified ambition against protecting America. We were coming out of the wars, and we knew that this land was our land and it was for everybody. And we should get out there and everybody should see what the previous generation saw, because it is grounding, it is clarifying, and it is as well uplifting. Yet when I came into my young adulthood and I started getting introduced to the environmental narrative, I had to go to a movie theater to see the inconvenient truth put on by Al Gore. I have lived through a cultural conversation that climate change is still not a unified problem or a unified solution. I did not grow up with a narrative inbred in me to protect the land. I grew up in a narrative of technology will change everything. Let's just focus on tech and focus on each other. Go to college, make it happen. So I bring that up because I, one, want to confront that as a community, as a national community, we do not have a singular narrative around environmentalism. And that is changing, and now brands are a part of it. I mean, Al Gore, brand, he had to get in there and talk about it. The second thing is that, you know, baby boomers and the heritage brands were a part of the establishment of outdoor schools that said, get kids outside, get them sitting together in the dirt, under the sun, maybe if they're lucky under the stars, and get them to open up a dialogue of education between one another. Let's get them outside for a week, let's put them in tents. And that was really scary for a lot of parents to let their kids go. But it was still in this pursuit of, we need to make sure that we are breeding the next generation environmental stewards. Yet for me, I had to pay to go to outdoor school. Portland Public Schools to this day is still not supporting outdoor school. You have certain districts that are fighting for it more than others. But overall, in an educational system, recess, science, arts, those are all the first programs to be cut. So even if you're not hearing about it and feeling it out on the streets in your community, you're definitely not hearing it from your schools. Maybe you were being taught to read John Muir back in the day. Well, now the kids are reading Steve Jobs. I've done so much research with young kids to talk about who their hero is, and the amount that Steve Jobs comes up is frightening because it is such a reflection on where we've pointed everyone in terms of the North Star, that environmentalism and that pursuit of stewardship has really fallen by the wayside. And then another part is that we used to be all really influenced by our local communities. We used to have Boy Scout troops where even if you didn't really believe in the idea of Boy Scouts, all your buddies were a part of it, so you wanted to be up there. You can go around to the national parks and collect your patches, and it was a camaraderie. Well, while I was working in food and recipes specifically, we were looking at all of the impact of globalization having on young people that were saying, over the weekend, I'm not necessarily being invited out with my group of Boy Scouts. I'm being invited to play soccer, or I'm being invited, into another family's, holiday or cuisines and rituals. And that there's a lot of young people that are completely exposed to new forms of exploration. They aren't just getting into Boy Scouts because everyone else is doing it. In fact, it's difficult for me today to find groups of Boy Scouts outside of really great little niche communities around the nation. I'm sure they exist. But I think that when you think about things about where these narratives take place and the role that brands play, and specifically what your investment towards content is, we have to remember all these disconnects. Because what I'm witnessing is a sort of assumption that those principles that we founded this industry on are still relevant and they're still true. And if you are lucky enough to be a part of a family that hikes and goes outside together, or maybe a part of a school system, or maybe a church or local group that can really, get out there and rally around the narrative, you're really left in this total world of exploration where you have to figure it out by yourself. So we have this new generation of people that aren't given such strict and strong silos. And I think that's a big reason why content is starting to fall short and why there is so much test and learn opportunity. And what does it mean? Do we need to do 100 social posts or 2? Because we just don't know what's happening and what's resonating. One of the scariest things I learned while working on Nature Bridge, which was essentially a private outdoor school around California, was that the average Californian student, and I heard it here in their last presentation, spends 4 to 7 minutes per day outside. And that is absolutely insane. And that, working with Nature Bridge, their research proved that most kids, by the time that they graduate high school, will have never sat on grass. They will have never sat in dirt, but they have sat on blacktop, tarmac. And so these are the same groups of people that are going out and they're festival camping. And for the first time, they shut themselves in a sleeping bag and they get into a tent and they're with thousands of other people and they really like it. And they decide to get out there and they decide to say, okay, what does that look like outside of Sasquatch or Bonnaroo or Electric Light Forest or whatever all the other big ones are? Yet when I see an image like this, I go back to that millennials doing it for the gram. And I'm sitting here and I'm confronted with the fact that my notions in assuming that the outdoor industry is carrying on all these principles still stays true is really ignorant of me. And how dare I look at this young lady who has never been camping, who's never had the time, who's finally got out of college, she's got a little bit of money to spend, she goes to a festival, she loves it. She goes, okay, I want to do more of it. She goes to her local Walmart, she buys Coleman, maybe she sees something online, she goes and she gets a polar knapsack, and she goes out into the world. And this is the feeling that she's left with, and when I say she, I am her, I am that girl. I dreamt about living in Tokyo well before I realized that the national parks were way chiller. And you're left with this feeling that you are not welcome because you don't know how to build that fire and you don't know all the different things and safety precautions. You don't know that you're supposed to pull off on one side of the trail when another group are coming down. You're in their mole mentality, just getting through it. And I sat there and I remember feeling this way when I went out and I started having to choose smaller groups of people who understood my level of camping. And every brand that I bought into, that I brought with me along my journey, I was just ridiculed along the way. When I showed up with my group of old school backpackers in my polar knapsack, I was ready to burn that by the end of the night because I got given the narrative of oh, you cute little girl, you are trying your hardest. And I was like, okay, I just thought this was cool that I could use my arms and sit down. But touche, let me go and invest in a sub-zero sleeping bag so I can hang with you guys and maybe you invite me on your next adventure. Well, then I go and I invest in all that gear and I'm wearing my Patagonia and I've got some really cool Sorel slippers and I'm geared up. And all my city friends look at me and they're like, oh, look at you. You're trying so hard. Yeah, is that working for you? How much money did you spend? Is it all color coordinated? I was like, yeah, because I care. And so there's this complete animosity out there. And I just sat there and I go, aren't we all just supposed to be outside and having a good time? And I realized that I didn't have a single brand on my side. Not a single brand could I wear or I could rep that indicated that, one, it was a very real pursuit for me. I gave every single fuck along the way. Yet I was being treated as absolute shit. And I'm sorry to curse. I'm going to do my best not to do that anymore. But this is what we need to come over. And when we think about content strategy, it's about lifting this feeling because no one deserves to feel that way. No one deserves to feel like the top of that mountain or that trail is a private club because it is here for absolutely everybody. So when I got here, I was like, that's what I want to talk about today. So that was a bit of the journey that I wanted to bring you on because I don't know exactly what all of you all are facing, whether you're working for independent brands or you're kind of a representative going back to your groups. But there is a lot happening and there are so many assumptions and so much tension in this industry that I did not expect. I was working for Hot Pockets the year before I started working for Nemo. Coming out of Hot Pockets, I thought the outdoor was going to be like the easiest, happiest place. No. I even feel a little cheeky sitting up here today in my little reclaimed army jacket, but everyone looks so badass. So that's what I want to talk about, is really being able to get over those different boundaries and to find a place and find the questions in yourself to say, what does my consumer really need from me? And how can I show up for them? How do I make it okay that they can use my product in all these different ways? And that I'm a part of their growth, or I'm a part of their becoming, or maybe their destination. This is a really famous, by this point, Outside Magazine headline, which I think just perfectly sums up this tension that not only I experienced out in the world, but when I read other content strategist white papers on how to handle this, everyone points back to this article. And the crux is really actually very functional. It isn't so emotional as the headline would make you believe. But it talks about how the whole pursuit of product development is lighter, faster, better. Yet these young people could care less. And aren't these young people just coming in and destroying? And that's the point that I said, no, but when they get there and they realize that they need it to be half a pound lighter, they're gonna frickin' love that you've already figured it out. They just aren't there yet. And that's okay that they're not there yet, because it's all an onboarding, it's all a growth. And that there's this really great guy, Glenn Nelson, he wrote for the New York Times, and just a really sweet little thing that says, as the world becomes more urbanized, it's increasingly essential to present the outdoors as a retreat for absolutely everybody. We cannot have people that grew this industry barricading people out of it. It's like an old boys club. It just doesn't work anymore, right? So in this idea that the world is gonna get smaller, we're all living in more urban cities together, we have to pursue this idea that the outside world is really there for all of us. It is not for one person, one activity, one trek. It's for absolutely everyone. And arguably, we have to figure out how to manage that flow. I don't think we have the infrastructure in place, but that's another conversation because I'm hired to talk about content. And I wanted to bring up this Fast Company article because it was a really, really great kind of example of what I'm trying to talk about, is that the brands in the world today that are leading the charge outside of their category, because they're on that cultural front line that I talked about earlier, are ones that create belonging. And it was funny because after reading this, and of course this article gets all into social fabric, it is a little bit more intense than what I'm talking about today, I started flipping through the outdoor ads and I saw a really great ad from REI, the co-op, and it says, "You belong out here." And I was like, oh, that word belong, that's good. I'm happy to see that, this is not a phenomenon of a conversation. This is definitely something that a lot of people are talking about, just not so publicly and at the forefront of content strategy, which tends to be so data-driven and trend-driven. So I found a little bit of excitement that I could bring it kind of back into my world. So if you can appreciate that all these new people coming into space that are bringing tons of money, tons of new interests, they're really vocal about what they want, what they need. They're experts in their own right. If we can embrace that their adventure begins right now, then I think your content strategy has only opportunity. Knowing that they're going to places to go Instagram, and maybe it isn't so bad. Maybe Instagram isn't the worst thing. There's definitely some terrible examples of where it can go really wrong. I will not deny that. But it's okay that maybe a post makes people want to get on a road trip and get on the hike to go see the beautiful place, or to go into the cave and wear the really cute hat and get the shadow portrait, or go, how did he get to that boulder over there? I don't know, that's probably illegal. He's probably not supposed to be standing there, but at least he's doing it, and at least he's out there and showing his conquest. Or you have tiny homes. I think this was a sidebar that I meant to mention in the data points, is that maybe we're not even capturing the data correctly. I know this last weekend, I stayed out in a yurt in the middle of Washington. I don't know if the outdoor participation report would consider me as someone that's participating, but lugging all of my gear for a weekend up to a yurt that I had to kind of manage with my boyfriend, that felt like a triumph. It felt huge. I woke up to a rooster at 4:45 every morning, and I had to build my own fire. But I don't know would I be counted? Probably not. So I think if we can appreciate that their adventure begins now, and that they don't necessarily have the tight-knit communities around them to foster their way forward or to nurture their becoming or their belonging or their destination, then maybe we as brands and as retailers have an opportunity to step up to the plate and help them out a little bit. Again, it's between them and their phone. You can be really silent about this. You can show up for them, and you don't need to let anybody else know that you've given them a little nudge, nudge, little wink, wink, and sent them on the right path, right? It's not all Super Bowl ads anymore. So really, this is where I wanted to shift into talking about types of content, because at the end of the day, it's content strategy, and I can't sit up here and just talk about cultural stretches and cultural shifts without talking about actual types of content. So you typically find that brands have to do an either or. They have to choose between being really inspirational, the Nikes of the world, or enriching, which is kind of the REIs. And so what you're seeing with that little blue, here we go, there's the slide. What you're seeing with that blue arrow is that inspirational content is necessary more than ever. Again, that's your content which is out on the front lines. It's what people outside of your consumer base are picking up on, and they're judging your company to see if you care enough. And not only if you care enough, but have you backed it up? If you show a certain group of people or in a certain location, have you backed up the fact that your company in its production or product design really do champion those same values? So you're needing it, but it needs to also go into this enriching place. And enriching content, I'll tell you right now, not sexy content, not like inspirational content, because you're there to meet someone when they are having a total problem and you're offering them a solution, and you're not wrapping it up in a 2-minute narrative filled with an amazing poppy soundtrack. You're out there and you go, oh, are your feet covered in blisters? Were you part of the new group of women that bought Danner boots after seeing Wild and your feet are wrecked and you can't wear any other shoes? Bring duct tape next time. You could do that. Maybe you are, I guess I'll be transparent. I work with Danner boots, and we're constantly having conversations around how to help people, break in their boots in a better way, or what are those different trails which are great for breaking them in, or maybe you're shoes are way too stinky at the end of the day, and everyone kind of criticizes you for being the one that's stinking up the car. Well, maybe some baking soda would help. So it's really not sexy. It doesn't have a lot of visuals. It's definitely taking that shift towards investing in more writers and doing research with people, not about their dreams and their aspirations, but like, what happened to you in that first trek out there? Or what piece of advice do you feel like you constantly have to give your neighbor that comes over and borrows your tent every 3 weeks? There's different bits of information that the world needs. And if we can build in a little bit of time to go and research exactly how people need to be enriched, then I think as a brand you start moving the needle. Because people are suddenly finding you in a moment of crisis and they go, thank you for showing up for me. Because I was gonna have to listen to a blogger from 6 years ago talk about their insular problem. And I will say that bloggers are a huge proof point for why enriching content works. It's just difficult because you have to wade through all the narratives and all the personal pieces to get to what you need. But if you're a brand, then you can cut the narrative aside and you go, it's blisters, it's duct tape, it's stinky shoes, it's baking soda. It's asking questions, it's showing up early, it's being planned, it's knowing how to use Reserve America, yada, yada, yada. So in this point of my presentation, I definitely want to make it, and I've said it before, really important to continue that pursuit of representing the right people in your content. We cannot, and I would never stand up here and say, don't even worry about it anymore. Just take the BuzzFeed model and create a crap load of copy-driven content. No, you really need to be out there, and you need to be representing hard. And what I mean by that is also like, go and do your own research. Don't just look at the data reports and go, oh, it's minority females. Let's put minority females in everything. Because you gotta know what your product is really being used for and what role it plays, right? And the biggest risk that you come up is that you really just can't look like a marketing effort. I think that's been the hardest thing for me in my career, is working so far down the line and you put something out into the world and you go, oh, we didn't even see if our distributors follow the same model, or the shipping that it takes to get from distribution out to the consumer. Is that the most eco-friendly way, or is that the most awesome way? Your consumer is really educated and they know how to go make sure that you're doing it all right. So, like I said, you got to research hard and make sure that you represent hard. That also means partnering with influencers and real people, or paying bloggers to create content for you. but it's not this quick decision-making, oh, let's throw a woman in there because women need to be presented, or throw a minority woman because the data shows it. It's getting real, right? The second thing, like I said, is really to be a resource. And what that means is really being their guide and showing up when they need you. And maybe that means getting out of a logging trail, right? So I think that this is a slide, we'll skip over that one. Well, this is a slide that you see a lot with content strategy. If you go onto LinkedIn, you look onto SlideShare, everything goes content strategy. It's figuring out the right place, the right time, the right audience. Yes, that's true, but none of that is programmed. It's just making sure that you have valuable keyword content to show up in search. So while a lot of my clients ask for Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat, I'm always bringing them back to Google search, always bringing back to GPS maps, little in-app compasses, health apps. How do you take that data and help them propel along their journey? So there becomes a moment when someone like me sits up here and you go, this is all great, the world is changing, everything's a cluster, where do I begin? So I've got a couple, I just have 2 little hacks to kind of help anybody in the audience start figuring out how to start solving some of these problems, maybe start exploring new avenues to be a resource. And there's a really great website called Think with Google. Think with Google is a free online publication. They are constantly looking at search trends, and they are trying to let you know what is happening between people and their devices. And so you can go on, and here are some amazing stats that just the idea, anything with ideas in the title, backpacking ideas, trail ideas, bachelorette party ideas. You know, you could find your way to get people to your brand by using the word ideas. You also have this amazing trend of people looking for outfits for, and as well as, you know, different brands. People are specifically looking for brands and different shopping lists. So here's kind of a screenshot. If there's any slide in the presentation to take a picture of on your phone, this is probably it, because it shows you how hyper-personalized search is working. People aren't just going to Google to find out where something is. They're looking for your brands to come up and say, okay, we have an idea for you, and you can drive them there, right? So think with Google. Everyone should bookmark that because it's the best. And you can look at even keywords that are associated to your brand or your product, and you can see how that keyword has inflated or maybe deflated over the time. And the last hack, which is one of these platforms that I don't think a lot of people talk about, is Pinterest. But the beauty of Pinterest is they have this thing called rich search. So if you sit there and you're like, I have no budget to do research, all I can do is download your data reports, do yourself a favor, get into Pinterest and type in anything around your product or your brand. Here, I just typed in outdoor recreation. Now this bar that is highlighted are rich search topics. So this immediately shows you what people are searching for the most against the kind of content that bloggers have already provided. So in outdoor recreation, you're seeing activities as number 1, ideas, games, wood, design, room, gear, adventure, area for kids, architecture, quotes. That's an immediate list of thought starters for you to go in. That's an outdoor recreation search. That's really, really high level. So that's a really great way just to get in there to see what some of these people in this emerging community are doing and what kind of information they're seeking. So with that being said, I've talked your ear off for well over 40 minutes. I appreciate everybody for sticking in here with me. This is my thank you slide for listening to me. And if there was anything in this presentation that you found valuable, or you want to holler at me or get a coffee in the next couple of days and say, hey, you kind of poo-pooed Boy Scouts, let's talk about that. I'd be like, okay, because I don't mean to sit up here and poo-poo Boy Scouts, right? Like, I'm definitely here. You guys are more experts than I am. So I would love to talk to every one of you, but if you would like a copy of this presentation, I'd be more than happy to send it out via email, and I'll stand up probably just off to the side here so we can make room for the next speaker. And if you can't catch me, feel free just to throw your business card down on the stage, and I'll be sure to collect it, and I'll follow up with an email. All right, thanks guys.